and we interacted, and we recorded, we continue to interact differently. If you map that progression with the progression of our sources of livelihood, it loosely begins from hunting and gathering, with some basic farming, just that's very subsistence. So those a good amount of hunting and gathering with subsistence, and then some communities then evolved to become more farming oriented, while others became more livestock oriented. And then those who lived around water bodies supplemented that with a good amount of fishing. The remainder, or for whatever you needed, was breached through barter trade. And then as we kept growing, we came into the cities, or cities, or first of all towns, and then they became cities. What changed with that was, whereas initially we were producers of what we ate and wore, in the cities we became consumers. And so what we did basically was exchanged our labor for sustenance, if that could be summarized. The third thing that has hardly been mapped out properly over that entire progression is the structure and role and power distribution of the family unit, or the place of the individual in those respective evolving units. Now, one misconception of the very beginning is that by default all these societies were patriarchal. That's really not true. Some societies were very matriarchal, and some still are up to now. But today's focus is on fatherhood, but I needed to dispel that one piece of noise immediately. And two societies that were matriarchal that I do know, the Agekoyo has a heavy matriarchal root. In any case, Agekoyo at Mobe had 9 daughters, and the men in their lives appeared miraculously. We will talk about the unbelievability of that on another day, but just suffice it to say the clans in Agekoyo are female, which is very unique in many regards. And then a second space that is one of the Zimbabwe tribes, I don't know if it's a Shona or the Ndebele, is very matriarchal, to the extent, if as a child I am misbehaving, my own father goes to my mother's brothers to try and help him sort me out. It's that heavily, it's that matriarchal. But the matriarchal bit aside, the role of the fathers as a society changed from simple families to complexities, from original simple subsistence hunter-gatherers, barter trade, to basically exchanging of trade. I mean, your effort with for food and sustenance has really, really changed. In the hunter-gatherer regional family village setting, fatherhood was simple. Okay, it was not easy, but it was the roles were simplified, because it revolved around provision of food, provision of security, and provision of education. Now, the education system was not the formalized KCSE 844 that we have, but there's a form of education. Among the Zulu, for instance, they lived in units called the Impis, the warring tribes, and boys from, I think, as early as 9 or 10 were embedded among the Impis. And one of the roles of the fatherhood bands there was to teach you basically war. I personally find Shaka a very fascinating character to study. For one reason is he is aware people are gathering at the borders of his country, they're arriving from abroad, and he's busy massacring communities around. I just would try to understand his logic. But then secondly, in terms of military genius, Shaka was brilliant in the sense, like the education he did is the Zulu boy was very well trained for war from a very young age. And that was done by the fathers, by being embedded with them and working with them. Although for a period of time, frankly, among the Zulu, marriage was either delayed or discouraged, just so that you could be able to take all that testosterone and put it into, again, I digress. But as the system has been changing, okay, you could be able to clearly tell that in this original time, fatherhood was very simple. You get married, whichever way, whether it's you steal your neighbor's cattle and give to your father-in-law, or you get cattle from your uncles and you give to your father-in-law and you get a wife. So you get married, you provide for them food, whether it is through going out and hunting and bringing the literal physical animal, or participating in some form of farming, or being able to go give your labor and get some food. That was very simple. And then the third was you educate. And because education was never just one-on-one, it was boys or children were educated in groups. The fatherhood role was pretty simpler then. But as society kept changing, and most especially when we made the move, I think the biggest move was the move from just living within our clans and bands and beginning to move in cities. The fatherhood role maintained some of its original aspects of provision, which is largely what moved fathers to the urban areas, whether it was going to mine over in Durban or in Joburg, or coming to look for jobs in Nairobi or in Kisumu, or whether it was going to farm in the big plantation estates. There was a movement of people. And then the fast breakdown of fatherhood, or the biggest challenges of fatherhood, we do know, at least in the African continent, did emerge at that particular moment for two reasons. One is the world they were stepping in was strange and it was new. It needed to deal with money and had blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs, very different from what they had. And then secondly is it was not very gradual. At least the movement from small family units to villages to kingdoms was pretty gradual and almost, not necessarily always, but almost organic. So the moving, there was a lot of support even as a change was happening. But the transition from village to city was almost an uproot and replanting. And then once we were in the cities, the rate of change, and with it, the shift in power dynamics, was extremely, I don't know if exhilarating is the right English word here. It was very, very, very fast. The world moved from the agrarian revolution to the industrial revolution. And then from the industrial revolution, we moved into the information age and into its very subset of the digital age. And now we're already moving into AI. And you need to recognize one thing. These changes, at least from an African perspective, are happening at or give at the rate of like 20, every 20 years is this massive shift, okay? Most of the people, at least the panelists here, grew up pre-mobile phone, okay? But by the time we were 20, so it means that within 20 years of our living, we moved from no telephone to the mobile phone to the, like smartphones already. That's within 20 years. So imagine your mother, your father, who was born either in late colonialism or during colonialism, has been able to live through all of that, and he's now living through AI. So you can imagine how he has to view and think of his own fatherhood. Even you as yourself are challenged. So in the village setting, when it was simple, the fatherhood role was not only simple, but there was a communal aspect of it. A, to hold you responsible, and B, to give you the support you needed. There was an uncle you could turn to, there was an immediate grandfather you could be able to turn to. But now in a digital age, not only are we more and more isolated, even though we're in a crowd, which is ironical, but also now the other voices that are stepping in to help with the fatherhood are voices or individuals who, had they walked physically to your front door, you'd either chase, fight, or fend them off. But now these are the voices that are influencing or in another way fathering you. Specific to some contexts, A, Africa in the colonial period, B, America during like the opioid crisis. One of those particular moments in history were significant to fatherhood because in both cases, fathers were en masse removed or restrained from interacting with their children. So they were either jailed or incarcerated or restrained or separated one way or the other. And there is a big chunk, there's a generation that has not been properly fathered, or in some cases, not fathered at all, completely. And then fast forward to 2024, when we're having this recording, there's an additional problem. It is the evolution of ideas. For every of the previous seasons I have spoken about this, the worldview that was dominant was a variant, was a version in the society, was a version of what we today tend to refer as the Judeo-Christian worldview, or was, it believed in transcendence, it believed in God, there was a belief in human beings being image bearers, whether it was in our rural original African setting or in the initial cities as they were being built. Man and was seen as being made in the image of God, and the value system was set that way. However, like right now in 2024, one of the biggest pushing voices is the voice of critical race theory, or CRT, and various other critical theories seem to become the dominant voices in modern society. And that has very many significant changes for the father, because critical theory, I feel, is a very dangerous theory. It sees people through categories, okay, and divides people into oppressed versus oppressors. And in many cases, the modern father finds himself in arbitrarily pre-assigned to the category of an oppressor because he is a male, okay? And patriarchy is already seen as a problem and as a mistake. And therefore, many fathers are having to navigate the already challenges I've listed, and now they are walking into a milieu where the dominant worldview is saying, by the way, as you're navigating being a father, please know you're part of the oppressor class by being a male, a heterosexual, and one, two, if you're also a religious person. And therefore, the modern father has been underfathered because of the previous reasons, and is now having to try and navigate the world of fathering when there are many other dominant voices and maybe hostile. And then he himself is seen as a threat. He's seen as part of the patriarchy, and he's seen as being misogynistic, and it is predetermined just because of who he is. And quite honestly, not many of us have been given the tools to even have the awareness, okay? And then secondly, the tools to be able to navigate this. Research has shown that fatherhood and fathers are needed. In religious circles, it's been shown that when the mother takes the children to church versus when the father is present in the religious experience, the likelihood of the children staying in the faith is, I think, 5 times higher when the father is involved in the faith, more than even if it's just the mother involved in it. When fathers are present in the lives of their daughters and in the lives of their son, the education impact, the self-image impact is significant. But the question is, how shall we help the father to be able to navigate their own challenge and the uniqueness? Because it is clear they do bring value. They are needed more than providing bread, they as a person are significant and their value is needed. But they need to be helped to navigate the challenges so that they can be well. This might be perhaps the longest intro I have made, and maybe it was wrong to have a man make it. But for this discussion, we need to have this authentic dialogue about navigating the challenges of fatherhood. Back to your studio.
Yes, this is the preacher side of Sire. This was the longest intro. And it's covered, oh my God, everything. I was just remembering about the chat, bit which will come to later. But let's start, as we always do, what is fatherhood and how has it influenced your journey? And because we went with a man, and because there's only one female on this panel, they know when you're watching this video later, yes, I put a female. Let's start with Syria. What is fatherhood and how has it influenced your journey? And if yes, so far.
Wow. Indeed, that was the longest intro. But a good one indeed. We've seen or heard different aspects of where we came from and where we are. For me, I think fatherhood is number one, a responsibility of not just financial, not just providing or being the head of the house, but the presence of the father in a child's life, both female and male children, is critical. I cannot emphasize more how important fatherhood is. And I think it's the aspect of being involved in your child's life. Not just, you could be present, but you're not involved. So you could be there, yes, you live with the mother of your children, but you're not present in the child's life. You don't take part in the child's life. So for me, it's that involvement, that knowing your children, that impacting your children in different aspects of their lives or in all aspects of their lives. For me, my experience of fatherhood, I will not lie, has been the best. My dad was Superman from the time I was a young child. And the relationship that I've had with him has impacted my life. I tend to have, and Andrew can confirm, most of my buddies are guys. So, the chick who is always hanging about dudes, whose friends are guys and I think one of the biggest, most visible impacts for me is that I can think top of my head is the fact that I'm a speedhead. So if I did not have the relationship I have with my dad, I could not change the tire that I changed today. I could not try and diagnose the problem with my car that I can today, or have that conversation with men. So that's for me. But essentially, I think the fact that my dad was present all through my life to this day makes me a stronger person, makes me a stronger human being, because of the values that were instilled, because of hearing that voice. There's something about a father's voice in a child's life that, even if you're going against what mom is saying, the moment you hear dad's voice, something happens. I don't know. I've not studied it. I've not researched it, but I have seen it, both in my life, in other kids' lives, in observing fathers, and in my own son's life. So it has been a good journey. I have a good relationship with my dad. And I I think the reason I'm on this panel is because mostly of that experience, not so much for my sons, but for my own experience. And of course, to get to hear and to give a female's perspective of what fatherhood is. Back to Posa.
Okay, thank you. Same question. Tony, Andrew, Tom. I don't know who to pick. Nyara Nyara, who wants to go? Okay, Andrew,
Alphabetical order, man.
I've seen you unmute. We know
Right.
who we are going to a game show with, who will hit the buzzer very quick. That's Andrew.
I'm very chonjo, man. Don't joke with me. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So many years ago, I used to observe my siblings and their children, and I loved the way they were bringing up their kids. So I asked them how they got to see this, and all of them told me, both of them told me that they went for parenting classes. So I did the same with my wife. We went to, I don't know if you've heard of Raising Future Parents. Dr. Mkolwe in Kenya runs this program, has done it for a while. And honestly, it was one of the best things that I think we could have done for both myself and my spouse as parents. And the very first exercise that we did in that was actually a conversation where they asked, how were your parents? Because the parents that you have a big impact on the parents that you become, which is why they call that program Raising Future Parents. So how you parent your children is how they will parent. So most people parent as a reaction to how they were parented. If their parents are very strict, they either end up emulating them and being very strict, or going the other end of the spectrum and being a bit too lax, and vice versa. And in that journey, starting with that parenting class, I guess my wife and I often discuss parenting, we discuss how we are being as parents. And I've seen the importance of my influence on my kids, just as I see the importance of my wife's influence. And I think there's a balance. It's not a good and evil balance, but I think it helps make a child more rounded. I grew up, for those who don't know, for most of my mom passed away when I was very young. I was 2.5 when my mom passed away. And it was a while before there was a woman in my life that was my father's spouse. That took some time, and after that came into play, there was let's call them a few challenges to start with. We get along fine now, we get along well, but earlier on that wasn't really the case. And so the main parental influence in my life was my dad. And like any other kid, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't like about my dad being my dad. There's a certain nervousness that comes into your bones. I can see Tom is smiling because he recognizes what I mean, because you're like, dude, you know, Syria and I were in primary school together, and we used to have these diaries. And one of the worst things a teacher could do would be to write a note in red pen in your diary, which you'd have to get your parents to sign off on. For me, that was my dad. And I knew the moment I got one of those notes, man, it's like the world was going to end. And so I didn't like it at all. But as I look at myself now, as I look at myself as a professional, as those lessons that I got from my father have been the biggest influence in who I am. And beyond the education that he paid for, the guidance that he provided, and the support that he gave me financially and otherwise when I needed it, it's those guiding lessons and those principles that guide my life till now. There's a lot of things I still tell my son that sometimes I tell him, and in my head, I'm hearing my dad's voice speaking those same lessons. So for my part, I can't underestimate or understate the importance of my father, and in general a father in a child's life.
This is serious out here, Simba. Tony, Tom, who wants to go? Same question. What is fatherhood, and what does fatherhood mean to you, and how has it shaped your life journey?
I will go. Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, great. Fatherhood comes in many ways. Obviously, from siring a human being, so that can make you a father. Secondly, you can also be a father through adopting kids. You can adopt kids formally, or just our usual African way, where you have kids living in your household, and they are actually supposedly, they see you as their father. Fatherhood also something that can be substituted, so to speak. I'll give an example of what my dad told me some years ago. He told me, do you imagine as old as you are? I think I was 30, I don't know what 30 something I was. As old as you are, your mom can take you from here to another home or in another place and tell you, introduce to another person and tell you this is your father. And you know he will become your father from that point on. But I cannot do the same with your mom. I cannot bring another woman and make you call her your mom. So in another way, fatherhood can also be substituted. So it means that we can also play fathers to children that we do not necessarily. We can come into the lives of other people and become their fathers at that stage in life. For me, fatherhood revolves around many things. First of all, is of course obviously to the general basics of fatherhood: to provide, to protect, to be a guide, to discipline your children, so that they live within the parameters that we desire that they walk. And like Andrew said, I think it's Andrew Suya has said that we are actually products of our upbringing. So our roles as fathers also is to just make sure. What about now, Anthony? You okay? Yeah. So we are products of our upbringing, and I am a product of a father who was my friend. I can speak to him about him for many hours. But largely, my dad actually retired when I was 5, and he lived in my life for more than 30 years. And I spent a huge amount of time of my life around my dad, particularly from the age he retired, went to the village. So he took me with him to the village later on in life, in my primary six, and I hung around my dad for as long as I was alive. So essentially, high school, I would be with him. When I started to work, the first 11 years of employment, I was within close range of his reach. And he played a big role in the sense of being that person who was able to instill values in me. He was my life's compass. He is one of the guys who knew me pretty well. He had this ability to just look at me and tell me, you know, man, you've not come to say hi, but I think you're just broke. Let me go and get you some little money to sort out your stuff with. He was a believer in order and consequences, which he also brought us, including myself, around. He has, in a large way, impacted the way I have been as a father to my 2 children. So I'm more or less, while I was smiling, that a lot of things that Andrew was saying were a mirror of the usual fathers that we had in our days. But the thing also is that he has made me have that awareness that I need to be present in the lives of my kids. With my wife, we always make sure we have a rule that we can do whatever we want. We can go have commitments. We can have a business meeting. We can have some engagements out there. But our babies have to see at least one of us before they go to bed. That is the kind of presence that we are trying to espouse as parents. And for me, particularly as a father, I see what it means to my kids. I see them seeing that protector. If my daughter, someone pisses her off there or threatens her, and she calls my name, she knows that my dad will come out. So it has changed me to being someone who is accountable, who is more responsible than I would say, for example, 10 years ago when I had no. So that is what I can contribute at this point. Thank you.
Tony, you're up.
Great. Same question, right?
Yeah, same question.
On International Mother's Day, I wrote a post, and the post begins like this. The most influential person in my life is my mother. And here we are discussing fatherhood, and I'm as I'm listening to this gentleman, I am reluctant for my turn to come because it may not follow the exact trajectory, but I wonder how to start that. But I would say this, that for me, it's a little reversed. My mom is the more influential part in my life. I have 2 brothers. They would say the same thing. I am very good friends with my dad. It was not always like that. And I say that with a lot of honor and respect for him. I would not want to dishonor him in any way, in any shape. But my mom was more influential. My dad did teach me some things. I feel like my mom was more present. I feel like my mom took a lot of flack for us. Like she is the one who really influenced boys, which is interesting. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I do remember, though, that it was not an isolated case. I think some of the women around me were more committed to their families, in my view. but I did learn a lot from my dad, and our relationship actually became better when I became a man and when I got married. And I actually took a bit more initiative to try and improve it, and I'm happy about that. I'm glad that I did that. We have a very good relationship. We are good friends, and it's never too late. I think I can still learn from him, and I do learn from him. I wish that I would say that there are deep lessons like Tom and Andrew are saying, and Syria can change the wheel of a car because her dad taught her to do that. I wish I would say things like that, but I don't have deep things or all the things that well, formative things that I can remember that I can say similar to that. I do say, however, that, and I'm hoping that I'm representing someone who probably didn't have a very good relationship with their dad. It is possible to salvage it. It is possible to salvage that relationship, and it is actually possible to take a journey of fatherhood. I am a father now. I am excited to be a father. I love the role of being a father. I shared when I was trying to promote this webinar, I shared that, and I said it is also the most challenging role. I shudder every time. I wonder if I'm doing a good job. I am happy. I get a compliment here, but I love what Andrew was saying, that we are raising parents. I also went to parenting class, and I learned a whole bunch of stuff. And I bring my imperfections, I bring my personality, I bring things into fatherhood. And I am concerned, and I'm happy to be concerned. I never want to get to a place where I feel overconfident that I am doing a good job. Just today, my daughter misbehaved at church, and I had to correct her. And I felt really bad. I don't want to correct her in front of people, but whatever she did needed to be corrected right there. I was trying to honor her. I was trying to not be upset, but I was upset, and I was visibly upset. And it's things like those that keeps you wondering, have I not taught you better, So I think it's a journey, and because this is an intro, I don't know how this discussion will go. I am excited to be a parent. I honor my dad and for the lessons I have learned from him, despite being the first person to say that my mom has been more influential. And I take this responsibility very seriously, very, very seriously, hoping and believing that I'm going to give the world citizens who are responsible, who are independent, who contribute, who are influential, who are not swept about by any wind, who can stand on their own and make up their mind. I'll stop there.
So from Tony's thoughts, what if we are to do a balanced scorecard for fathers in the world and in our setting, because we are all Kenyans here, how would fathers score? Like what, and let's start with the coaching side. That's Syria and Saya. We are not no Pentecostal answers, just keep it brief. But I'm just wondering, what's a balanced scorecard? What's a report card on fathers, on situation per ground? What is really happening? We've all had nice stories from Tom, Andrew. At least Tony has gone the other way. But what's a report card? Syria, let's start with you, then Saya, you can unmute and tell us.
Oh, we are doing badly. I can tell you we are doing badly. It is, I was reading the other day and seeing the number of women who are raising kids by themselves is very high. So number one, people are fathering children and not getting involved, not taking responsibility, not doing anything, not being present, not instilling nothing. So the children that we are raising are being raised without a portion of that upbringing that they need. And so these parents that we are raising, because they probably one day will become parents, are missing something. And it's terrible. So I have a friend who was married initially to someone who turned out to be to be of the how can I put this? How can I say this politically correctly? He liked the same sex. All right.
Okay.
So they eventually got a divorce and they have a son. And the mother is so determined to keep her child away from him because of the influence that he will bring into her son's life. And it's a personal choice. But listening to that story made me really think about the influence that fathers have on their kids. So aside from that one story, there are many stories that I hear of see, read about, it's on the news, it's everywhere, how badly we are doing in terms of fatherhood, in terms of presence, in terms of just, I don't know, it's painful. That for me, it is quite painful, not only because I have experienced a beautiful relationship with my dad, but because around me and around my son, there are men who influence him, right? Because I see the importance of, even just when you think about the initiation of a boy into manhood, I mean, I can't go into an initiation of a child, my son, when he's going through that process, or even when he's growing up. I cannot do the same things a man would do because we are different. And so there's a different impact that you have by virtue of being the different gender. And so scorecard wise, we are doing badly. We are seeing boys going the wrong way. We are seeing them being influenced by a society, by the world that is just corrupting these children. For instance, when you think about it from an African perspective, there's things that African fathers do. So I was watching a TikTok the other day of a girl asking her, is it Senegalese father? What would you do if I told you that I proposed to a man? And the man said he would kill her, right? So it got me into a rabbit hole of checking all these stories about people showing up what their African fathers would do, how they would react. So there's something about African fatherhood in a sense of discipline, in a sense of head of the house, in a sense of protection. You know, there's so many things. It's so wide, but it's beginning to wane out. It's beginning to deteriorate. And I think when I think of the 80s and when we grew up, something that I have observed looking back and just talking to people is that the thing that was missing was emotional connection to our fathers, right? So they were there. They were in our lives. They provided, they were the disciplinarians. You couldn't speak when your father was there, but he was there, right? And so what we need to improve is the fact that you need to show your children who you really are. Your children need to get to know who is this person, because you're a person, right? You have all these characteristics. Yes, you can be the disciplinarian, but they need to get to know who you are as a father. And that was missing. And so as I hear Tony talking about building his relationship with his dad now when you're adults, it's a different time. I imagine trying to do that in the 80s or in the 90s. It probably would not fly. But today we are beginning to connect emotionally. Men are beginning to be in touch with those emotions in a way that it's okay. When we were growing up, it was not okay for boys to cry. It was not okay for boys to show emotion. And so that has its own repercussions. And there were pros and there were cons. However, in terms of a scorecard, we're really, what I can say is we're really doing badly. And there are different matrices that we can use to check that. But from my perspective, we are really doing badly. Not that all of them are not doing their part, because many of them are, and many of them are going the opposite direction. So you had a not so good childhood in terms of your engagement or your relationship with your dad, but choosing to be the opposite. So choosing to give your children what you did not have as a father, and that is that relationship, that involvement, that engagement. So many people are doing the right thing. We hear parenting classes going on, and men trying to help other men to become better parents, because maybe that's not what they experience. So there's good things that are happening because we are now talking about it. But in terms of those who don't, and those who are present, who are not present, and those who do not engage, and probably even do not know what it means to be a father, then the score is bad. And it always takes me back to, when we say you've made a lady pregnant and then you recur that story, the child comes out looking exactly like you. And I think that's just the divine way of showing you there's no running away from that. But there's what is missing, and it's prevalent, and it's seen, and the consequences we are dealing with, and we will continue to deal with. Back to you, Posa.
Andrew, before let's get the scorecard from Saya first, and then you can give your take.
Out of 10, I think men are somewhere between 4 to 6. And the difference is because, so there are two things. One is news value versus reality. What I mean is, if a dog bites a man, that's not news. But if a man bites a dog, that is news. So by the time somebody's coming to me for coaching or guidance, they're in problems. Most of the people who are doing well are not coming to me, okay? And same for any other counselor. And then secondly, by the time people are posting and ranting about their parents, about their dads, is when there's a problem. Very few, very, very few, like, Andrew, Tom, have unlikely gone on a online tirade to praise their dad, daily for every week. But we've seen a lot more fathers being castigated and absentees. We've had entire channels and programs for deadbeat fathers, but we've not had channels and experiences for fathers who are present. I actually think one of the international men's something is on the same day with the World Toilet Day. So it ends in a bleep like that. So that accounts for, so I'm giving men a scorecard between 0 and 10, they range between 4 to 6. And the margin is number one because of the news value of absentee fathers and all of that. It's given a bit more awareness than is. Then secondly there is a substantial absentee father problem, and it has two sources. One is men who are just not taking responsibility, and that's very, very sad, very unfortunate. Biblically, it's sin, it's wrong. And there's also a number of men who've been honestly elbowed out of the lives of their children. Okay, fathers who've been elbowed out of the lives of their father. By hostility, either hostile ideas or blame shifting and stuff. I have seen men who've been worked to the bone to try and prove their worth or meet an ever-ending list of demands. So, but at the end of the day, the son or the daughter who's missing out on a father does not quite care whether the father was elbowed out or elected to be out of their lives. But yes, the crisis of absenteeism, the crisis of the number of single mothers, I personally feel is, if it is not at epidemic levels, it's not too far. It's not too far from that particular level. And then I think the other thing that accounts for that is just lack of training. Lack of training in what it is to be a father. I think we've grown or been raised, or at least in past generations, as if people reach a certain age and the father switch flips on and they can become good fathers. And it isn't the truth. They need to be modeled, they need to be trained, they need to be equipped for that. But in an extremely fast-paced generation, that isn't the case. And also what I think kind of makes it worse is when people originally, when people grow old in the city, they go back to the rural places. So many times when guys are stepping into becoming fathers, the people who should be mentoring them are either busy at work or they are retiring and going back to the rural place. So there's a gap that is being made there in perpetuity. So many people are just under-equipped or ill-equipped for that. And then I think the final piece that makes up for the between 6 to 4 points that men are missing is, Sirius touched it, how we were fathered, how we were parented. We tend to parent the way we were parented unless and until we are reparented. So many of our fathers understood their assignment to revolve around financial giving and discipline. Okay, so giving the material things and discipline, but emotional presence and involvement were either not recognized or were shifted to our mothers. And as an end result, if that's the model or the framework you are parented with, arriving with that same model into this age and time becomes, it doesn't work. It doesn't work too well. And especially when you now have to not only parent against the normal growth and development challenges, but against an unceasing wave of alternate influences mediated through our internet spaces, it becomes very necessary to be a bit more present and a bit more aware. So 4 to 6 is what I give the men, and I'm cutting them, like genuinely many men are actually doing a good job that they're getting praise and recognition for.
Drew, you're up.
Right. So, Yanni, I even took notes. So, there's an expression that says, if you ever come across a fence in the middle of a field, don't pull it down until you know why that fence is there. You know, because when I look into what's been happening over the past 2-3 decades, as society has moved into a more, shall we say, modern view of things, at least from our perspective, there's been a lot that we've talked about, female empowerment, women's empowerment. I'm all for that, and I think there should be more of that. Where I do have a problem is that especially in what people refer to as third wave feminism, there's been a lot of what Saya mentioned, which is not just trying to uplift women, but at the same time trying to push down men, to denigrate men, to show men to be the oppressors, you know, to show men to be evil. Never mind that it's a very small subset of men that is usually guilty of carrying out a lot of things. And one of the things that's important to understand in any society, a society where you have such disparate physical natures between men and women, the people who can control men are men. You know, so if you want to hold men to account and you want to hold men accountable, you shouldn't weaken manhood. You should strengthen manhood and make better men, because that is what will give you the control of the few elements that would go rogue, as it were. Now, why I mentioned the fence is because I think that's part of what's happened in our society. And I know this is a very complex issue, but I just wanted to touch on some things, because there were certain things that existed traditionally, and they were seen in a more modern context as being oppressive. So when people got rid of them, they got rid of them wholesale without taking the time to understand exactly what was the reason they were there. You know, like the sexual revolution is one of those things. You know, when you go back a few decades. If a guy got a girl pregnant, and I mean, there was a push for this person to step into that child's life, the people who would make that push primarily would be the girl's father, you know, and the other men in the girl's life. But when there's a push that pushes men down, men aside, saying, listen, you can't be this, you can't exercise strength, you can't do the things that have defined masculinity for generations, you're creating an environment where men are not held to account. And that's a very dangerous thing, because there's a quote I read one time that a man will treat you the way he knows he can. And if he knows that he can sleep with you and you'll be fine with that, and you're not going to have any requirements of him, or the society at large is not going to have many requirements of him, if the consequences of those actions become inevitable, he will do it, and he'll do it gladly. You know, so as we have pushed women up, which should have been done, I think there's a lot of things that have not helped women in the past, and it's important for them to be brought to the fore. We also shouldn't abandon boys and men. You know, there should be a call to the greatness of men, that, you know, the kind of things that people aspire to. You know, when we talk about men that even other men think of as, this is a guy. No one's talking about the guys who are wife beaters. No one's talking about the guys who are abusive, who are oppressive. You're talking about those people who aspire to greatness, aspire towards doing great things, aspire towards provision, aspire towards protection. You know, so I think there needs to be a conversation about how we prevent things from flipping 180, such that the scales are not tipped. They were tipped against women, and they're now being tipped against men, when actually what we're trying to find is a closer to realistic balance, you know? And I saw there was a question that someone asked about what presence means. And I think presence is not just being there. Presence of a man in his family's life, in his child's lives especially, is about the quality of the time that you spend with the children. Yeah, quantity does impact in some situations, but the quality of it. You know, are you engaged with them? Are you understanding who they are as person, as people? Are you trying to guide them in terms of the things that are right, that are wrong? Are you trying to help strengthen their moral centers, trying to strengthen their inner person? Like, how is it that you're going to help guide their morals? How is it that you're going to help them overcome adversity? You know, all these things that good fathers do, where you're there and you're providing a counterpoint to some of the things that life might throw at you. So present fathers, for me, a present father is someone who is there. You know, like Tony, I see my flaws in my fatherhood, and I question myself very consistently. You know, I often, when my brother and I talk about how we're bringing up our kids, you know, like seriously, we try to give our kids the things that we didn't have, but we also sometimes forget that some of those things that we gave them, or that we did not have, led to the people that we are. You know, not having certain things helped us become the people that we are. So one of the things that I constantly struggle with is, as I strive to give my kids all of these stuff that I didn't have, can I find the balance of not giving them suffering, but still giving them struggle? Because struggle is necessary. You know, there's an experiment that was done many years ago where trees were planted in like a warehouse where they were not subject to the elements. They used false lights to simulate sun, but there was no wind. And when all of those trees matured, they fell over because they had never faced adversity, which had forced them to grow their roots deep and give them strong anchors. You know, and that's kind of what we're doing. If we give our kids all the good things in life, and do not allow them the benefit of struggle, because they need that. And I think that's one of the things that fathers can help bring. So it's the challenge that I put to myself, and I constantly try to see, am I going too far? Am I not going far enough? How do I balance between giving my kids a life where they do not have suffering, but they do have struggle because I think it helps build character, and that's necessary in the world we're going out into. So loads more to say, but let me let other guys speak as well.
Okay. So I know during the motherhood conversation, Shalom dissuaded us from using the word good motherhood and just let's just focus on just what's being a mother. I don't know. What did we decide, Syria, on the wording? I can't remember. But I'm just because I think if we go through this next phase, next section, it's gonna take us an hour. Let's go through your mambo matatu, as in your mambo matatu of what it takes to be, Shalom, forgive me, a good father. And how are you balancing all those roles so that you don't grow insane? And how are you doing continuous fatherhood education? You know, the equivalent of CEUs and CPDs for professionals. How are you doing your mambo matatu? And let's just go. Drew, you have to exit my screen for now. Let's start with the T's. Tom, Tony, then Syria, and then Drew. Let's do our mambo matatu. What's your three we cannot miss, you can't, like, wasia wa baba, for lack of a better word. Tom, let's start with you, Tom.
Thank you, Fosa. I just want to speak into the subject that we were talking about before a moment, a few minutes into this. Now, there was the issue about absence of fathers. I really want to weigh in on this. We fathers are not the providers or the givers who will have to announce it. And therefore, they're usually, in our village, we have a joke about one of our siblings, or one of our cousins, whose fees was paid by the dad. But then when he's going to school, the mom would give him, say, 10 shillings or 100 shillings and say, hold this, my child. I've really struggled to get this for you. It is not natural that this kid will grow believing that the dad did as much as he did for him, particularly in terms of the education. So this kind of arrangement, this kind of scenarios end up making the fathers look like they are not doing their roles, they are not contributing to the well-being of their families, and end up being branded as people who are not present or providing. Of course, there's that bit of people being claimed to be absent or deadbeat while they were actually pushed out. And you all know by now as adults that men do not generally focus on telling their version of stories. So while we'd want to give our versions and how we judge someone about how they deliver the story to deliver in their families, you realize that most of the times we guys were in the same cycle as the same person being called deadbeat. We know the true story, but we don't amplify it. And the person also doesn't amplify it. And so we end up having people being classified as deadbeat or absent while they're actually pushed out. I've seen cases as a HR person where someone ensures their child, they go to the school to deliver the card or something. They find that the child's name has been changed. So you're here looking for Saya Arodi, and then you find in school that this Saya has turned to become Isaiah Washira. And then 10 years later, I'm being broadcasted in the Facebook platforms as a deadbeat father, and with a battalion of people who are really drumming this as a version that is actually the truth, which is not necessarily a fact. Now, I think we can't change the way men are, particularly the fathers are, in terms of how they express their giving or their providing or their support that they give their kids. But I think it's important to just let kids also see it. I think Babu Matatu for me is not antagonizing kids with their parents, with their fathers. even if they do not have, there are moments where the current situation, you can have an imbalance between the abilities of the father vis-a-vis the mother. There's no need of really making it look like the father is a lesser father simply because they're not able to buy a bicycle for their kids. It's important to let the father be the father, regardless of the fact that they may not be able to match up to the desires of the other parent. The other bit is allowing, of course, there are also those toxic engagements where it's really terrible even for the kids to actually get to meet that the father, or for them to be the same space with the parents. But as far as it's possible, it's also important to let kids access their fathers if they're not living with their mothers, as far as it's possible. Of course, there are moments where it's not really practical and it's not possible. Where you have those extremes, it's all right. But as far as possible, it's important for us to have access to these kids so that we change these narratives. And when we have this scorecard that Saya is talking about, we have better parameters to look at and report on. The last bit is also to hold our male friends accountable as men. I think that's just another bit that we also have to, a role that we have to play as fathers and as men. Each of us, or many of us, will have friends who have really sprinkled lots of kids out there. And they will disappear on them and reappear, disappear and reappear at will. It's like the moon. And this sometimes.
House number 5.
Sorry, someone is going to house number something. Okay, great. So it's also important for us to point out where we see fellow men and fathers not really being the fathers that they need to be. Not letting people take pride in having kids whom they are not participating in their lives. If we call it out, sometimes people realize, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. I thought that was the in thing. I thought having kids all over is the big thing. But for me also, it's important for us to, as men, to point out where our fellow men and fathers are failing in their responsibilities. Because when that is not pointed out, we tend to think that those of us who are like that, we tend to think that it's okay. And therefore we cause more damages to these kids who we think we are doing a favor by bringing around, but we are messing them up more than even we are messing the mothers that who are giving back them to us. Thank you.
Tony, and if you, yeah, just go ahead.
Thank you, Posa. So mambo ni matatu, right? All right. One of the things, I was actually scribbling things down. I have really enjoyed listening to Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for a quote. Hey, you are quotable. Not giving them suffering, but giving them struggle. I really like that. I've never had it worded nicely like that. And like you, I tried to teach that, but not the way it came out. You have given me a nugget there. Thank you very much. Mambo yangu matatu is the first one I want to talk about. I can see questions about presence. I'm also looking at the Facebook from time to time. I want to talk about being availability. I want my child to be, I want to be available for my child. I have memories. My dad was playing volleyball, and I remember accompanying when I was really young. I accompanied him, and he was so good. He was called Simba. He was a hero. I remember some pockets of him being a hero of mine. And my daughter knows how much I love Iron Man. And there's a time I was that hero. Now she's a teenager. I mean, she now she sees through me better than when she was little. But there's a time I was Iron Man. I could do anything. So being available helps you be that hero for your child. Being available means dropping your child to school, means listening to when they want to talk to you, because sometimes we forget the milestones that kids go through when they're little, and they are really huge milestones. Oops. Excuse me. Equipment failure. My daughter, who is 14, likes to say a long time ago, and I want to laugh when I hear a long time ago. But I remember that once I said that and my dad made fun of me, he was jesting. Then my mom said, "Where? Kila mtu ako na zamani za kale zake. And it just speaks to our transitions in life and the milestones that we consider big. So there are milestones that these children consider big and important to them. So being available, being present for those milestones when they are transitioning into school, when they are transitioning into teenage, when they go from 9 to 10, I mean, they're double digits. Being there, celebrating a birthday, taking out, I was even taking some things. Are we the men who take our kids to hospital? I want to be that man. I do that. Am I the man who likes being asked questions and taking pictures, creating memories? That's one of the rules for me. So I homeschool, and for a lot of my time I work from home, and I love that so much because I feel like I'm so at my child's beck and call. Like when she takes her break at 10, I also take a break, so we have time. When she takes her lunch break, unless I absolutely have to be somewhere, I take my break at that time as well. So I have designed my life around that, to be available, to be present, as part of my attempts to be there to hear and to answer some questions. The other good thing that I want to talk about, hiyo ni ya kwanza, and it can be extrapolated, but we don't have all the time. Ya pili is to love their mother. My child's mother is my wife, or in some cases, let me use the word, I have written the word honor their mother. Honor their mother. I want to treat my wife with respect. I want my child to know that I honor her mother. I remember listening to James Dobson a long time ago, and he said that one of the best things you can do for your children is to love their mom. So in cases where people have divorced, men should still treat that woman with honor. That's the mother of the children. I still live with my wife. I'm married, happily married. You should show honor to that mother. That's the mother of those children. I think that cannot be overstated, and I don't want to continue beyond there about that one because I am married. I'm not divorced. The third one is that you should be a teacher. Those are mine. The third one is that you should be a teacher, and you should teach your child life skills. Andrew is my superstar today. He talked about raising parents. Sure, I mean, Andrew, my daughter is 14. She does not want to get kids. She does not want to get married, etc. And I like that. For now, I mean, I don't want to see a boy coming here, but I want to raise a responsible adult. I want to raise someone who can raise other people, and I have that in mind. In fact, Andrew, I didn't enjoy the news when my wife broke to me the news that we are pregnant. I was depressed. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen. I remember I told my wife, we are bringing a human into this world. It's still a story here. I didn't think about a baby. I thought about a human. I'm saying, my gosh, we are now going to be responsible for another human. And I like, because I'm not a very futuristic guy. For that one, there's one issue that I'm quite futuristic, which is the children. I think about what they will become so much. So teaching, and here for me, who is a person of faith, I want to teach them about my faith and what I believe. I want to listen to them when they ask me difficult questions. I want to listen to my child ask me about that Bible story about this that they feel is unfair and all that, because I want them to build their faith. Teaching is about responsibility and initiative and the value of work. I teach my child, I have only one child, the value of work. That work, she has to work. She has to get tired. That's why I really enjoyed Andrew's example, the place of struggle. There are some things that she must do. There are some things that are a must do. The others where we have choice. And then also introduce to her the options in life so that they know that life is not one way. My daughter likes asking me, why am I studying mitochondria? You have an office job. Do you use your knowledge of mitochondria where you work? And it has been a bone of contention. I have to learn to be patient. I have to learn, and going back to Andrew's statement. It has really helped me. There's a way I've been trying to explain it, but that statement of Andrew's really helped me to put it in perspective. And also telling them that the world education is not really to get a job, is to open their world to all the options that exist. And also it's good to know many things because of the interdependencies that are happening in the world. So I take that literally as my job, to teach my child. And it calls on a lot of patience, a lot of listening, The default, like, is it Tom Wand who had said the default is I think it is Saya, the way we behave like our parents. I really want her to shut up sometimes and listen. I mean, I know. But the times we are living in, where that parenting style does not work. So yeah, that's it. Honor their mom, who's my wife, teach them, and be available. Those are my three.
I think Syria, you're up. And if you could just throw in emotional labor, I don't know how that will I've just thought about it because it's a huge problem. Men do not carry that labor. Tony, I think you were on that panel when we did emotional labor, right? Okay, maybe Tony, just your mambo man, so it will be your fourth point. Then we go to Syria.
Thank you.
What's your advice on just advising men about the emotional labor bit, the one they never think about? They think of the big items. Nyumba imelipwa, school fees has been paid, but the emotional labor that we women shoulder and take it out on our children. Just, I don't know, how can fathers do that better?
Thank you, Posa. And it's still a struggle for me, but I have really improved on that front. You can hear how I've arranged my life. I mostly work from home, but because I'm a coach and trainer, I do have to leave for some physical work, some appointments, some meetings, but I have chosen to work from home, especially post-COVID. And we chose to homeschool, and that kind of helps me focus on that emotional labor that women have to bear. And being raised in Africa, being an African, and observing my mom, I did share here how she is a more influential force in my life. She did everything, but then she also organized her boys. She has 3 boys, and she created an army. It was effective. It was like a factory. These people, she didn't need to be involved in the duties. We had a roster that worked like clockwork. So I would say that I have a bit of help there because I was trained to wash dishes. I was trained to clean toilets. In fact, I remember there's a time we had a help who was afraid to clean our toilet because she was not used to that toilet, yeah, Puketi. We had one toilet in the house. I'm the one who showed her. I said, well, this is normal. I went and cleaned the toilet. The other day I went to train in a place that was a bit dingy. I do this all the time. If the toilets are smelly and I get in there, I actually take it upon myself to clean them a little bit, just to help them smell a bit better. It's something that was taught into me by my mother, to take the initiative to leave a place a little better. So borrowing from that now, Pastor, I have a bit more, and living at home a lot, have a bit more, I'm able to see where I can come in. So we do have help, but I keep telling my wife that I want to keep making ugali from time to time because I don't want to get used to having a help because they do leave from time to time. I want to be involved in some of the things that ordinarily I would leave to the woman, to my wife, because when that house help leaves us for Christmas or for whenever she's not here, I have found that I struggle so much because I used to struggle so much because I had to do so many things. Because now she's gone, we have all to pitch in and to do some things. And that has helped me reduce that labor. Remember, I was saying that part of what I want to be is available, that if you want to drop the kids, when our kids were going, our child was going to a normal school. So we used to drop that child. I used to drop my child, I used to pick up my child, etc. So you divide the work so that your wife is not, or the lady of the house is not the one who is doing all that emotional labor where she's not getting any reward and where it can build some resentment. So I've learned to share that. And I'm challenging men that we need to share that. Also, having a girl is kind of helpful because I grew up with boys. So for me, I was socialized to respect them and to treat them like they are more gentle. If I had a son, I would roughhouse him a lot. Because I mean that's the environment I was in. I was used to fighting with boys. You have to fight for your own space. You have to use muscle. So having a daughter means that I have to be somebody else completely. I have to keep learning. Now she's in teenage. There are things that I have no idea where to begin. I remember, I can share this here. I remember thinking about her period and wondering, oh my God, how will I deal with that? And it was a real stressor. I had forgotten that I was married. that my wife would take care of that. I mean, I was taught to take initiative. Everything is my work. So I was thinking, who will I get to help me? Imagine I was wondering who will help me, and I have a wife. I didn't even know when it happened. I was just told, oh, she came and told me I had a period. My wife had warned me. So that has helped us in one way not relegate all that work to my wife so that she does not have to die with it.
Syria, you're up, and if you could also take Ezra Rose's question on how can a mother support children where a father has decided not to be available to reduce the negative elements of that absence? Because I know you have a bit of experience. So your mambo matatu,
Yes.
yeah, I know your mambo matatu from, and then Ezra's question.
All right. So my mambo matatu, the first one is, and we've mentioned this severally, is to be present. I think for me, it's so important for fathers to be present in their children's lives, to not only influence them, because influencing does not come naturally. So if you are not present in your children's lives, you're not involved, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know how they're doing, you don't know them, then it becomes more and more difficult to influence their lives as they grow older. Because then what right do you have to influence them? You don't know them, you don't take the initiative to be in their lives, or maybe even you don't know that it's something that you need to be doing. So, and this goes out to fathers who are living with their kids, but then are quite aloof to being involved. So you provide, you are probably making lots of money, but you're not there. So you're raising your kids from far and providing them with everything they need except your influence, except your presence. I think that it's critical to be part of their lives in terms of the things you do with them, the conversations you have with them, the activities you spend doing with them. Last time, Callum talked about playing games with, these family games that you play with that make you or will increase the interactivity that you have with your kids. When kids become teenagers, they just want to lock themselves in their rooms and do God knows what and watch God knows what. So you being involved enough to even notice when your child's behavior has changed, when something is wrong and they're maybe not talking about it. A boy might speak to his father about a challenge that I, as a mother, cannot, right? It could be an issue to do with a girl or a bodily function. How am I supposed to help? Because I cannot step into those shoes. You see, I believe men and women have their place, both physiologically, emotionally, and mentally, because we experience life differently based on our genders, right? And so that being present is very critical for our children. Number two, and I think it's just connected to being present, is being emotionally available for your kids. And it's difficult, and especially speaking from an African background, it's difficult. My son is here, hi. It's difficult to connect to your kids emotionally. So you're having a bad day. I think I mentioned in a previous session that when my mood changes, my son will notice. When I'm not speaking and I'm not, I'm a chatterbox. So if I'm not in talking mode and saying something all the time, then he notices that something is amiss. So if you're a father, do your kids know when something is wrong? Or are we trying to portray you're always okay? Men are not always okay. Pressure, I don't know what, problems with your wife or whoever your partner is, anything can be affecting you and you think that your kids don't see it. They see it. They see it, they observe, they learn, they know so much more than we think they know. So having that time enough to spend with them to get to know who they are, and for your kids to get to know who you are as a person, not just as father or father figure, is really, really important in my point of view. And then speaking of influence, see, and now I'm speaking from a point where, from a single mother's perspective, being present in your child's life from the time they are babies, keep in touch with your children. Because if you are not present in your child's life, there will come a time when the child will tell you, but why should I listen to him? He's never there. Or I don't know him, so how am I listening to somebody I don't know? Or, and it could be anything, so, hey, it's a real challenge. So for example, you are divorced from your wife and you're trying to be in your child's life when they're a teenager. So you've not been there, but all of a sudden you've come when they're a teenager and you want to lay down the law. For a child that you have not been present in their lives, you don't live with them, you don't know when they wake up, when they are sick, you don't know even probably the school they go to or what they're studying in school or their interests. So when it comes time for you to now demand that they do things a certain way, you're not going to be able to influence that child because they grow up with their mother. They see their mother morning, noon, evening, weekends. They spend quality time with their mother. When they are sick, they're with their mother. So then you show up and you want a child to behave in a certain way. You are not present. So see the importance of being present? Because, for example, same scenario, you are divorced, but you have time with your kids, maybe weekends or bi-weekly or whatever. There's a sense of influence that you will have over that child because they come and spend a day, 2 days with you. And so you can set rules for them, you can discipline them because they're in your space. They are spending that time with you enough to know my dad doesn't like this, or this is not how I behave around my dad, or he is teaching me a certain thing. So you do an activity or activities with them. So we can't just influence children because of the title of being father or even being mother. So it's important to make it real, right? To make it something that they feel, that they experience, and they know this person is a part of my life. That is critical. In terms of, what is the thing I was going to talk about? Listening to our children. So, and this is a confession, when my child was younger and he happens to be part Meru, in my head, he was hot-tempered. And I labeled him, hey, this child has a hot temper. He was very young. And when I went through the coaching process, something that we learned and were told to go home and practice is do something different with somebody in your house. So I chose my son and I decided to pause and observe. And what I did is to choose to listen. So because we are both talkative and we can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, my son used to get really upset when I am doing the telling. And so pausing and being the adult and listening to the child really flipped the kind of relationship I have with him. So even to date, when he is speaking, I will pause and listen. And it is something as parents, both mothers and fathers, we do not do well enough. Listen to your children. You will learn so much. If I tell you the number of things I didn't know and have learned from my child, it is amazing. So listening to your children gives you a different perspective. Fathers, in my observation, tend to like to tell and not to listen. To tell, do this, do the other, discipline, I don't know what, lots of things. And maybe it's the masculine thing to do, but something that I believe men should do is take time to listen. Some will listen and then interrupt the child in the middle and then take over the conversation. Pause. Let your child express themselves. Remember, our children are not little extensions of ourselves. They are individuals. They are people. They have this characteristics, personality, their wiring. And so you getting to know your child for who they are will give you more benefits than you trying to make them who you wish you could have become, right? And so listening is so important for fathers to do. And now if I can answer this question. So how do you support children where a father is not available? Number one, I think you need to be really intentional about which men are influencing your child. So whether you have brothers, if your father is present and he is a good, well, he is what you want for your child in terms of values, in terms of character, in terms of discipline, lessons, you need to pick people who will be able to influence your child positively, who will be able to guide your child, who will be able to mentor your child, right? So choose the people who will have those conversations with your child, and they should be lifelong. So when you're choosing a godparent, will this person be available all through your child's life? When you are introducing your child to your friends and you say, this is Uncle so-and-so, and it is a friend who you want to influence your child, then make sure you build on that relationship. Make sure they spend time. They go out and do things. He sees them often or she sees them often enough to know that this person is a father figure in my life. But you need to really be careful about who you choose to do that. For me, I had my dad, I had my brothers, I have, cousins that, specific ones, not everyone, that will influence. And then there are those, as I said earlier, I've got lots of dude friends, but not everybody is influencing my child. I choose who. So if I have a problem, I will talk to a person who I believe has a good sense of direction, of guidance, to say, have a conversation with Uncle so-and-so, or I ask my brother to call and speak to my son. And the conversation will have a different outcome from the conversation I was having. Maybe I was speaking too emotionally and the person is rational. And so they got to have a rational conversation with my son and he saw what exactly I meant. So same message, but being passed on to him, number one, from another man's perspective. So it's a male view and the conversations will be different. The connection will be different. So who you choose to influence your child as a father figure is really, really important. Because you had mentioned emotional labor. So this is something that fathers who are not living with the mothers of their children really overlook, because you are raising that child yourself. You carry and you're working, so you carry the responsibility of finances, you carry the responsibility of dropping or picking your kids, making decisions about your kids. When the phone rings and it's your help and something is wrong, it is you. So mothers can be overwhelmed. And that's why we say they need to be intentional about what you release to your children in terms of that overwhelm. So as a mother who does not have the presence of the father while raising their children, it's so important to be well. And to be well means you know yourself enough to know, hey, things are going south, or to notice when you're projecting whatever it is you're going through to your children, and to seek help. I believe there's nothing wrong with asking for help, whether it's from family or from friends. I'm sure you have a circle of people who can help. And where you don't, there's people who will surprise you when you ask for help, ask for advice, ask for just support in terms of what do I do with my son who is behaving A, B, C, D? Or do you know someone who I can contact to help my son be able to understand 1, 2, 3 things? So it's about being intentional and knowing when you are going through that overwhelm enough not to project it to your children. So intentionality is key. Posa, lastly, I think someone has said, what do you do with men who call at their convenience? Oh, hey, I could tell you stories about this, but I think as women raising kids, and especially sons with fathers who are not present, boundaries are very important, because some will call and be authoritative because you fathered that child, but you're not raising that child. So you are not fathering that child. And boundaries are so important. They can't just call when they want to. They can't dictate and tell you what to do with your child when they want to. There needs to be a balance. There needs to be, and I'm not saying don't allow your, fathers to engage with your children, but let them engage in the right way. If you want to be part of the child's life, then be fully part of the child's life. Don't do it when it's convenient, when you feel like it, when they are progressing. Fathers who show up, the child has now finished university, has passed really well, or has won something, or it's, it appears in very different ways. But if you're going to be involved in your child's life, then be responsible about that involvement. It cannot be because you are decorating the fact that you are a father by calling once or twice. Your child doesn't know you, and you don't know your child. So you have to be intentional about that relationship that the child has with the father. And also talk to your children about it, especially if your kids are teenagers. Speak to them about what they think about their father's presence or lack thereof if you're not living with their father, if you're not raising children while living with their fathers, right? So have conversations with them. You will hear very interesting things, and then you will be able to know, how do I handle that? For me, it got to a point where now I'm saying, I've done the most that I can with what I know. Perhaps I need to get help to support these two people. But then I had a conversation with my child, and the things that I learned, I was like, whoa, okay. This is now a completely different conversation. It's not the inability, but then it is, I don't want to because of A, B, C, D, maybe that happened, or the experience that they have with them. So intentionality, I think, is so important in the relationship that they build with their fathers. Back to you, Posa.
Drew, you're up, and could you tackle the patriarchy question? Yes. What do the panelists think about patriarchal society and its role in fatherhood versus the modern society?
Okay. So, maybe let me talk about just 1, 2, 3 quickly, and then we can come back to that question. So, there's a lot of stuff that everyone else has said that I think I resonate with, and Syria, thank you very much for that listening thing. It's not something that's new to me, but it never hurts to be reminded, and I think we all need to have such reminders every time, which is why I guess they say it takes a village to raise a child. So what I consider to be like the 3 things that I would say would define someone as a good father. I think one of the first thing is integrity. And by that, I mean, I think it's important for a father to be a moral guidance and a moral compass and a moral exhibition to their children, and to define what integrity is, not through your words only, but through your actions. Because and by integrity, I mean not just, hey, I tell the truth, but it's also, how do I carry myself? How do I treat people who don't have what I have? How do I treat the people who work for me? How do I respond when someone angers me? How do I respond when I owe someone money? Do I meet my obligations from that perspective? Am I going to be the kind of person that they can say, I am proud for this person, to say that this person is my father? And this has nothing to do with wealth. This has nothing to do with who you are, because there's a lot of people who are people of integrity, even if they're not people of means. So I think a father who can be that person for children, provide the guidance, but also provide the example to their children about what it means to be a good person, moral person, and define that morality in terms of how we and the children will engage with each other and how they'll engage with one. Another thing related to that, which I guess would be my second thing, would be accountability. Because I think that's a very important thing about I think fatherhood, and it's one of the things that fathers in their very often blunt and no holds barred ways can actually bring to bear. And I think it's important, and I'll give an example of how I try to do it. Like today morning, my daughter was half jokingly. My daughter is 5, a little over 5, and she was half jokingly talking to her mother, and she said, "I was drinking water from the cup, and the water jumped out of the cup and it fell on the carpet, but now I can't see it." So I had to ask her, "Did the water really jump out, or did you spill the water?" Because you have to own it. What you've done is what you've done, and own that. And you have to approach the world as it is, not as you wish it was. And I think that accountability of this is what I said I would do, and therefore I'm holding myself to account to make sure that it's done, and to deal with the consequences if I don't do it. That's an important trait for fathers to bring to bear, and to teach their children as they go. And then the third, and I know I could probably list a few more on this, is accessibility. And by accessibility, I'm actually capturing many, many things in terms of this. And this also comes to that emotional availability that more than one person has mentioned. And I think it's important to make a certain distinction here, because there's a misconception that men don't show emotion, or that men don't have emotion, or that women are more emotional. Now, in certain circumstances, I would say yes, that is true. That in some circumstances, women do display more emotion than men. That's not by all means a blanket statement. Obviously, the circumstances and individuals change. But when I say accessibility, I mean for the men and fathers to be able to let their kids see their emotion in a way that is authentic to them, that is authentic to them as individuals, that is authentic to them as men. Because men have loads of emotions, but how we express them and how we deal with them is different from how women deal with them. Like for me as a person, and I'm willing to bet that there are more than a few guys that are like this. When I have a really bad day or a really bad week, and I'm like hanging out with my guys and I want to decompress, what I don't need is to talk about what the day was or what the week was. It's just a little bit of escape, a little bit of freedom, and that's how a lot of guys interact. Because one thing, I was listening to a podcast. There's a guy called Chris Williamson, a British guy who does this podcast. You can find it YouTube, Deezer, Spotify, many different places. And he was quoting someone else who said something that resonated with me. The line was that women bond face to face, but men bond shoulder to shoulder. So you're more likely to get men engaging and bonding and sharing their feelings and how they're dealing with things when you put them together to do a task, side by side, working it out. That's how men engage. Women are more likely to face each other, talk to each other, and have that interaction. Now, this is by no means to say that men can't talk to people face to face or women can't do things side by side. But in general, how it is that men express their emotions is different from how women express their emotions. And I think both of them should be validated. And men, fathers should be accessible to their kids to allow them to see those aspects of them and to understand that, listen, there's different ways for me to do this. There's different ways for me to engage with this if I am a boy who will grow into a man. There's a different way to engage in this if I am a girl who will grow into a woman who will try to be understanding how it is that the men in her life, whether that's a spouse or people that they work with, will how they will engage and how she will try to understand them a bit better. Yeah. And then accessibility is to actually be there when the children need you. It might be for big things, it might be for small things, but being accessible in the way. And this is something that I struggle with. I don't think that I always do it as much as I would. Sometimes the kids come and they say, "Hey, Dad, could you help me with this and this?" And I have to say, I can't do it at this point because I'm on a work call. I'm doing this, or I'm going to travel because my job requires and involves a lot of travel. So, but what I do try to do to compensate is to be there when I'm here, and even beyond that, to reach out in different ways so that when they want to talk to me, I am here. When they want to share something, show something, I am here. Because, they say if you're not there to listen to the little things, which for them are big things when they're children, they won't share the big things with you as they grow older. So you need to be there. Okay. Now, when it comes to a patriarchal society, and how, let me just read the question again. What do panelists, I believe you're talking also about Franco J's question? Yeah. Okay. So it says, what do panelists think about a patriarchal society and its role in fatherhood versus the modern society? That's a tricky one, because I didn't entirely grow up in a patriarchy. As much as African society in general is that, I'm a city boy, uh, as many of us are. And I think, yes, there's definitely elements of the father being the head of the household. But like I said, my dad was the authority in the house because my mom was, so it's not like I had as a child a counterpart. That said, I think all societies evolve. And I think it's important to understand where we have come from, where we are, and where we're going, because those three things are inextricably interlinked. And you can't throw everything out and say everything that was done in the past was bad and everything that we're doing now is good. Um, there's a mixed bag. There's a mixed bag with everything. Social media is the perfect example. It comes with a lot of great things, but it also comes with a lot of dangerous and some of them bad things. So when we talk about a patriarchal society, by definition, if you're following the textbook dictionary definition, that's where the men lead and the men are the authority figures. Yeah, that's not a bad thing, and it's also not a good thing. It's just a thing. You have to look into a bit more detail to understand what it is about that that makes the society work. I think having strong characters of good moral fiber that are men that are leading a community is a very good thing. If that comes with oppression of the young, oppression of women, then that's not a good thing. So fatherhood, as we evolve, as we let go of some of the things that were there within our societies, we should understand where they come from. In many societies going very far back to what Sarah was talking about in his introduction, a lot of why the men led is because it was a very strength-based society. When you were being attacked, it was the strongest people in the society that would protect you. Those strongest people physiologically tended to be the men. Women, especially pre-birth control, they go through a very vulnerable period of time from when they're pregnant up until their kids are old enough to be a little bit more self-sufficient, and they need the protection of men, of hopefully the men in their lives, because they're vulnerable in many different ways. When it was agrarian societies, a woman wouldn't be able to go out and farm, when she is very, very heavily pregnant, So that was the genesis of where a lot of these things came from. But we can't say that because that was the genesis of it, everything about it no longer applies. Because there's certain things within that are hardwired into us through decades and decades or centuries or thousands of years or millennia of evolution. So I think it's important to understand, where did we come from when we say the society is a patriarchy? Why is it a patriarchy? Why did it evolve that way? Did it make sense within the society? And what were the things about it that we should hold on to? And what are the things about it that maybe we should have a conversation about how we can help those evolve? Or if it's something, there's some things like FGM, that we talk about and we say this is something that we have a better understanding of that's one of the things traditionally we should leave behind. But other things about a patriarchal society. Is it a bad thing for a girl to listen to her father? I don't think so, you know, because there's certain ways that the father will look at the world, you know, that will guide that girl. You know, like one of the things that I know many girls rail against is the way fathers respond to the the men and boys that those girls are interested in. You know, but if you look historically, there was an important vetting function that was involved in that, you know, because fathers, just like other men, it doesn't have to be just the fathers, even the brothers, you know the guys, you know, just like, and women do exactly the same thing when it comes to women. I can meet a guy, look at a guy, and I can tell a friend who is a girl, I can tell my daughter, tell my sister, cousin, I'm like, this guy's not a good guy, you know? And there are women who will look at women and tell you as a man, hey, I don't think this chick is a good chick, you know? So those are certain functions that existed within a patriarchal society, and it had positive benefits to it. Should I say that a father should be a gatekeeper and say, no, you absolutely cannot see this guys? I don't think that fits within our modern society. But there were positives about some of those vetting functions. There were positives about how it is that the fathers led and the structure that they provided, the stability that they offered, both in terms of, hey, this is the rock on which the world is going to bang on, and it will not get to you as long as I'm here. You know, that protection is part of the responsibility that comes with a patriarch. You know, you can't just look at the authority, you have to look at the responsibility as well. You know, so I wouldn't say that we need to get rid of a patriarchal society. I do think that as we've moved away from a strength-based society where you're now looking at softer things like more intelligence, you know, we don't need to be very strong to be a software engineer and become a multi-billionaire. You know, so certain things, you know, you can still be successful even if you don't have that physical strength attribute. But there were elements of it. As much as the society has evolved, it has not changed 100%, and we shouldn't treat it as. So I think it bears looking at with even eyes, not rose tinted or dark tinted glasses to say everything that was there in a patriarchal society was bad and we should replace it or we should throw everything out. But let's understand, why did things exist the way they did? Does it make sense for them to continue? Is this something that's negative? How do we take the best of the past and help it guide us into better possibilities in the future? I hope
Asante.
that answers the question, Frank.
I hope it answers. Well, to me, it answers the question. I have two questions. You know, I always have to speak for my villagers. Which villager? We're in Shamahoho again. Especially okay, the long distance fathers, my siblings who get to be watchmen and cooks. You remember this thing from in Nairobi and cannot afford to stay with their spouses and their children within the city. And so they trek to Western Kenya once a year to perform their fatherly role and come back. And it's the same thing that's happening to the same cohort that's going to the Gulf as domestic workers. They trek back home once a year. How are they able to, how can we, because this is a poverty issue and a systemic issue, how are we able to support them to be better fathers?
Yeah. That one's a tough. What I would say is, again, the world comes at you as it does, you know, and I think there are still ways and avenues, even if you cannot be there full time, for you to still be a father figure, you know. Communication doesn't have to be long phone calls. You know, maybe you don't have enough to travel home more than once a year. A lot of the people who come here to work for the jobs that you talked about in the Gulf, they might only get to travel home twice a year, you know? But do you take the time to actually try to engage? You know, maybe it's a text message. Maybe it's, hey, I know this person, they happen to be going home, or they're from home, and maybe they have a little bit more time than I do, and I can write a letter to my child. I don't have a phone with WhatsApp, but I can write a letter on a piece of paper, take a photo, ask someone. If anyone was to ask me, can you send a message, deliver a message to my kids back home, and the only way to do that is for me to take a photo and send it to their family through WhatsApp. I'd absolutely do that, so it's what how is it that the fathers can try to communicate to their children? Because I think part of what comes with the distance is sometimes a sense of abandonment, and I felt this because my mom passed away in a car accident when I was 2.5. And I didn't realize until I did a thing called the Landmark Forum many years later. Like I was in my mid 20s, maybe about 24, 25. And that was when I realized that for all of those years, more than 20 years, I had actually been resenting my mother for leaving me. Now that's not the kind of decision that was made by an adult, a rational adult. That was the decision that was based on the observation of a child. It was a very simplistic, you're not here, therefore you abandoned me. As I grew older, I obviously intellectually understood what happened, but emotionally, I didn't. And it wasn't until much later that I actually got into the space where I was like, oh, okay, I need to let go of this. So what I'm saying, it's just a thing. I'm not a psychologist. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think if the parents, the fathers who are distant, can find a way to still engage with their children, to take advantage of those small moments and actually communicate. Say those little things that I know we sometimes struggle to say as men. I love you. I'm proud of you. I think of you often. I'm here. I'm doing this for you. When I come home, we will try to make the most of the time that we have when we have it. But this is the circumstances that we have, and all I'm trying to do is the best that I can for you. Communicating that clearly as often as you can, understanding where the kids are coming from, not invalidating their concerns, their feelings of, I wish you were here, but saying, listen, I wish I was there too. And it's perfectly fine that you feel that way. But this is the life that we have. So how can we do the best with what the hand that we've been dealt? So I think that would help in terms of bridging the gap, because you can have physical distance but not have emotional distance. Conversely, there are many people who are in the same house as their children and have no relationship with them. So whether you're distant or far, I think the intentionality about how it is you approach your relationship is what matters.
Thank you. Because we need to eat, let's do the okay. My last question is, how should we women, if either as your partner or just a mother to your child, support fathers in being better fathers? And then and once you answer that question, you can add anything that I haven't asked during this whole almost 2 hours. Drew, I'm tired of seeing your face, so we have to go to another face. Tony, let's start with you because Tom has had to leave.
All right. I had talked about honoring that person, and I know that sometimes it gets tricky when the divorce or the separation is nasty. I think the two parties need to sort out the differences for the sake of their child. From a Christian perspective, I don't know the verses, but when it talks about divorce, the next part is about children because they're really important they're really important in the marriage or in that union. And so when people divorce or they separate and they're now not in a family, they need to prioritize their children. And I would urge anybody in that situation to do their best, work on their own emotional intelligence, and see if they can have a quote unquote working relationship for the sake of the kids. because in my view, like I had said earlier, you need to honor the mother of your children. You need to teach them that that person is important, even if you're not getting along with them. You need to teach them that they are honorable. You need to teach them to respect that person, the mother. You need to teach them to treat them in a certain way. So that's what I would say. I would say do what is within your power to have a working relationship. I know a person from my church who co-parents, and their relationship is amazing. And these are her words. I want to attribute them with a lot of caution. She says, "It is because I don't have drama that we're able to co-parent very well." I'm pausing for effect. I'm not blaming anybody in this story, but she herself has said that to me. It is because I don't have drama. So she's the one who was left. He has another family, and they co-parent very well. So I would urge the women to try their part in that story to create a working relationship. Yeah, that was the main question, Posa. What was the other one? Anything else you forgot?
Anything else I might have missed out, and you need fathers in the world to know, and just generally everyone to know.
So I'll make it short because of the time. I would say I have gone to programs that help men become better fathers, become better father figures, become better men. And I went there a wounded man, feeling that I had a story that was very difficult, feeling that my story would change the world because of the way it was difficult. When I listened to the stories there, I realized that my story was so simple. In fact, if I was to pick a story, I would still pick mine with all its issues. And I was a guy who started, when I was introducing myself, I said that I have been able to work out my issues with my dad, and we are good friends, very good friends today. My charge to men is that we should not be defined by the past. We can do better. We need, and I listened to Andrew earlier talking about men and emotions and how we should meet. I'm a big fan of that. I love men's meetings where we are able to open up, where we are able to challenge one another. And I love friendships that allow us to do that. I was having a chat with some gentlemen the day before. It's actually yesterday. And I know one of them. He mentors the other. I didn't know that that relationship exists. And the younger man in that relationship, we were in a training session. And when we finished, he had agreed with his family that they would meet him in Nairobi and they would head together to Murang'a. And they were late. They were so late. And he was busy. He was tired. He had been standing most of the day. So he calls them after the session and they are still at home. And he was mad. Then his mentor told him, so I just listened, I was watching, and his mentor told him, I hope you don't get offended. And because of that, I hope you'll be able to calm down and be okay by the time they get here so that you can proceed where you're going in a more civil demeanor. It was really nice to hear that you can have such relationships because this guy knows him so well. He knows you are upset. And when they come, this evening is not going to go the way it was expected because they actually delayed him. He was tired. They were at home. They should have left earlier. The time they're supposed to meet is the time they are leaving. And I praised that relationship. I told them, wow, you guys have a fantastic relationship. I didn't even know. At that point is when they told him, yeah, this guy is my mentor. He knows how I would react. So I think we need to have more relationships like those ones where we can challenge someone in the middle of the day. We don't have to arrange, let's have a men's meeting, let's have a nyama choma, let's go have a beer. We don't have to do things like that. We can talk to each other. Andrew and I are busy on a call and I hear something say, hey, Andrew, and I hope that story is not going to disturb you so much. You can correct someone because of the level of your friendship. Nimemaliza.
Syria.
This is such a good conversation. How can we help men become better fathers? I think that women need to speak to, the drama women, right? But it is not Drama is not just from the women, but from where you are. If you are able to advise younger women about how they treat their men, or the men in their lives, or the fathers who are fathers to their children, then we can say many things. But let's remember that all situations are different. So my situation will not be the same as situations are not identical. So again, I could be dramatic because the guy is full of drama. But if I'm level-headed and this other person is just crazy, then there are things that you need to pause and decide what and how you will handle it, right? It's very easy to have a civil relationship without having to be friends, without having to discuss you. So if things are so bad that you can't speak to this person, but they want to be involved in their child's life, then make it clear that the only conversations you are going to have, or the only interactions that you are going to have, are interactions about your child. Whatever thoughts you have of me and ideologies that you have around what I am doing with my life, let's separate me and you, being the man and the woman, from the conversation about how we raise the child. So come into an agreement around how you raise the child, who's going to spend what time with them. Just like if you were married, then there are things that you agree on, or if you're partners and you're living together, then there are things that you agree on about how you raise your child. So I think each case is special, but we can help fathers become better fathers by, number one, giving them access to their kids. I know somebody who in their present marriage is not able to have children, but he has a daughter somewhere whose mother will not allow him to see his daughter. And unfortunately, the daughter is his photocopy. So it's very painful. You should see the pain in that man's eyes when he talks to or has to talk about his child. So we really need to give access to the men to be part of their children's lives if they want to be. Number one. Number two, we need to have boundaries around bad influence to our kids if we notice it. So you left because this man is crazy, or for whatever reason, but he wants to be a part of his child's life. Set boundaries. Come to an agreement about the how and the what that is going to be a part of your child's life. Number three, please let us not badmouth fathers to children. So something that I learned and I did not do where my child is concerned is say, oh, he's like this, he's like this, he's this. Those are my opinions of what he is. Who knows the kind of relationship he'll come to have with his father? So it is absolutely wrong to do that. Let your child get to know the father and make decisions for himself, because children observe and they will know and they will connect or not connect with their fathers. But let them be the ones to decide whether this person was bad or is bad to me, the child, and not to the mother. You'll be surprised how smart children are. Yes, you want to meet, they want to, so teenagers might go through that space of identity and they want to meet their fathers and blah, 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 and the mother doesn't want and what have you. At the end of the day, they will meet their fathers. And they will resent you for not having allowed them access to their father. So you are going to break your own relationship by doing that. Make it possible for them to connect. The children are growing. They will grow up and make their own decisions about who the father is, and they will end up having their own relationship with their fathers. You may not like it, but you can't remove the DNA from your child. Whether you like it or not, that child carries the DNA of their father. And at some point, they will get to meet them, they will make their own decisions. But don't be the person who denies them or badmouths them, because it will break your own relationship with your child. I think for me, the other thing that we can do to support fathers is, men can be corrected, right? But it is the way that we correct them that matters. If I start shouting about how you're behaving with the children or the impact or whatever, it's never going to fly. So we need to measure ourselves in how we correct men or how we give them feedback. It's, communication is all about the how that we do it. I may say the same thing 100 different ways. If you know your partner, father of your child, your spouse, there's a way that when they're calm, they will listen, or, find the right time to give that feedback or to have that discussion. Not when it's heated and you're emotional. So that emotional intelligence we're talking about is critical to having those conversations with the men who are fathers to our children. Is there anything else I would want the world to know? I think we have said a lot. So back to you, Koza.
Okay, Drew.
Great. So, you know me and my quotations. um, one of the ones that comes to mind for this is something that says, hurt people, hurt people. In other words, people who've been hurt are going to go and project that hurt into others. So one of the things I would say to women is exactly what Syria said. Don't weaponize your children. There's many women who do that, because just think about it from this perspective. No matter how bad your parents are to you, there's a certain way that you feel when someone talks badly about them to you, because they're your parents. That's kind of how it feels for a child when they realize you're speaking badly about their parents. And in the first instance, they might actually listen to what you say, believe what you say. But at some point, whether it's from the father themselves or someone close to them, like a sibling, a friend, or something, they will get that man's side of the story. And if that story doesn't add up with what it is that you have told them, you are damaging your relationship with the child. There's a good friend of mine, friend of the family, who has gone through a divorce with his kids. And one of the things that he told his daughters is, listen, for me and your mother, we have consignment. So this was between us. This doesn't change anything between me and you. So I am not going to talk to you. My commitment to you is I'm not going to talk to you about your mother. And all I ask in return for that is that you don't go and tell your mother what we discuss. And I think that's cool, because what he's doing is he's made it clear to them that what's fallen apart is my relationship with your mother. Your relationship with your mother doesn't have to change. And I'm not going to try to influence it in any way by telling you one thing or the other about your mother. That's for you guys to decide. And his kids respect that. That, unfortunately, is not reciprocated on the other side. And I think just, taking a rear row seat to see where things are going, his ex-wife is going to come to regret it, because she's alienating her children, or trying to alienate her children from their father. And they're never going to react well to that, just like they wouldn't react well to their father talking badly about their mother. So that's one of the things I would plead with women. No matter how bad the man was, don't talk badly about it. We can say, listen, things didn't work out. He wasn't a good man to me, but that has less to do with him as your father. You decide what kind of father he is. I should not be the one to tell you what kind of father he is. And if the kids need support, be there to support them. You don't have to lie about him, say he's better than he is, but you don't also have to paint him with a brush and say this guy is an evil guy. But that's in the situations where the relationships haven't gone. What I would say to women as an additional appeal is that raising kids is a team sport, and I think both father and mother are necessary in different ways at different times. At the same time, both father and mother are necessary. And I think women, there's certain things that you see and certain ways that you see them. that it's important for you to share with your the father of the children. I'm allowing that as a blanket because he might not be your husband, but the father of your children, because you will have insights about your kids that they won't, or at least not in the same way. At the same time, also be open to hearing from the fathers about the children as well, because they have opinions and those opinions actually matter. Because um, if you rubbish whatever it is that the husband says or the father says, you're teaching those kids to rubbish what it is that the father says. So it's a team sport, and like any team that works well, you have to lean in to the strengths of each other, but also work with each other to compensate for the weaknesses. Yeah, that's I guess what I would say. Just remember, don't belittle the impact that fathers have on their children's lives, and treat it as a team sport, not a combat sport, where you're all trying to achieve the same thing. You want to raise people who are productive members of society and who will have fulfilling lives, whatever lives those will be. You want them safe, you want them healthy, you want them to grow up and have families of their own and experience love and fulfillment in their lives. So ultimately, you're trying to achieve the same thing. So do you want to be right, or do you want your children to have a good upbringing? And then see how you can work together as a team. You can work as a team when you don't like each other, but for the purpose of that team, which is bringing up the kids, you can do a great job. As a last note, there's so much to say. I mean, this is something that's it's very close to my heart in terms of fatherhood, my own fatherhood, both as a child and as a father, but also in general when I see the impact that society at large, not just in Kenya, but all over the world, is undergoing because of a failure of masculinity and a failure of fatherhood in many respects. Yeah. So I think fatherhood's importance needs to be recognized. And by recognition, yes, I'm not insisting that we have Father's Day or that people send us new ties and chocolates and that sort of things, but let's recognize that fathers are important. And it's not a mutually exclusive statement, because you can acknowledge that fathers are important does not take any importance away from others. The two things can be and are true at the same time. I think that should be it for me. Thank you.
Saya tufungie kituo. And if you have a question that hasn't been covered, please send it or raise your hand and we can take it and make it brief. But Saya, you can close the studio.
Thanks. The joke is normally said motherhood is a
Okay, so let's, as a non-realtor, just ask your question, then Saya can close. And if you have,
Hi, thank you.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
My name is Shayla Nyangara Nyanchera, hence SNN. So this is kind of like my private and still business profile. I'm still growing, so I'm blending it together. I'm identifying as SNN still. So do not worry. It's not just, it's still me. It's me in, okay. I hope you understand well. That's my personal profile as well. So my concern, I think I'll be following up because I'm very interested in the emotional bit of fatherhood, because I think there is a line that is not very definitive between how emotional a father should be. Essentially, actually, let's start with a man himself, because emotion has been so feminized. There are a lot of feminine aspects into emotion that I think a lot of young men are still juggling through. From listening to you, I have understood how you have matured through being individuals yourself into being great fathers. It's very insightful, and it's very nice to know. I was very happy to to hear how your children are experiencing you as their fathers. So I don't know how do you gentlemen find a definitive place where you can still maintain your masculinity and not be looked at as too feminine when you're trying, or when you're connecting with your children and even the mothers of your children? Thank you.
Might I try?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that emotion has unfortunately been feminized, you know. I think there's a conversation that needs to be had about how it is that men express emotion, and whether it is that, you know, there's a distinction to draw between a man pushing emotion to the side because he's focused on doing something, and suppressing that emotion, you know, because what it is that we need, first, it varies obviously between individuals, but I've definitely seen clear distinctions between how it is that men express emotions and how it is that they deal and process those emotions versus how it is that women process emotions as a general thing. You know, what I would say is that it is important to let men be men, you know, and let them, you know, engage with their emotions in a way that works for them. Because if you try to get men to express their emotions in the way that women does, in some ways it feminizes them. And the note that I just typed in the chat, there's actually a lot of statistical and experiential evidence that supports the fact that women look down on men who express emotions in a very feminine way, you know. Now, I'm not saying that men shouldn't express emotions, and I'm not even saying that men shouldn't express emotions in a quote unquote feminine way, but don't force men down a path that is not their chosen path, you know. Because when you say, I've often had people say, listen, hey, you can't bottle it up inside, you have to let it out. You know, that's your perspective about how it is that someone should engage with their emotions. You know, I think the call to men should be engage with your emotions. Don't hide from them. Don't pretend this doesn't affect me, this doesn't bother me. But how it is that they engage in them, I think that's a decision and a choice that should be left to the men. And allow them the space, allow them the grace to explore that, you know, and at the same time, don't express, you know, it's just like trying to make women more masculine is as dangerous as trying to make men more feminine. Let men be men, let women be women. And there is a middle ground that you can find, you know, in those engagements. Don't belittle men who say, listen, this is something that's tough for me. I need to deal with it, but I need to deal with it in my way. You know, I mean, I've had situations in my personal life, whether it is from my spouse and other women that are close to me, where they're like, listen, you need to let it out. And I'm like, well, sometimes maybe not. You know, maybe what I need is to decompress. And decompression for me is something different, you know, as it is for all men. So let them process it as they need to process it, and allow them the grace and the space to do that. I don't know if that answers your question, and then Sheila.
Okay. Saya.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone. In my closing thoughts, I'll just go to the Bible in Genesis 1, that should be 28. It says, he made them, that is God, made them male and female. And of course, later on, he'd say it was very good. There's something about the idea of the difference between male and female, that it can be complementary without being competing. That there is something about the male side and the female side that can be complementing without needing to compete. And over the years, what I think have been exploring in this conversation today is how the fatherhood aspect of that has been chipped away at. However, when a car is broken, it doesn't make owning a car a bad thing. When a cup is chipped away, it doesn't make the idea of having cups a bad thing. It just means we need to either insure the cars or train the drivers better or train the person washing the dishes better so that the cups don't chip. So similarly, there's been fatherhood has come under quite a beating and a barrage, but I'm appreciative of the stories of hope and the practical examples that have been given that show it's not as terrible as often hyped, and then that B, positive fatherhood is actually a reality. And that probably what we need is to train the upcoming fathers and even the current ones to become better drivers so that or become better drivers of the fatherhood experience. One of the things I do in my day-to-day is I work with people thinking through their careers, and often individuals who arrive at my table, some are late for, say, applying for an internship. And when they're asking me, is it too late? I shall tell them, yesterday was better, but today is certainly better than tomorrow or than never. So for those who have who listen to this or who have been listening to this and begin feeling like A, maybe they didn't have a great, they were not fathered in a great way, or B, they've not been fathers that are great themselves now. I still think the same truth exists, that fine, yesterday would have been better than today, but certainly not doing anything today makes or guarantees that tomorrow will be worse. Everyone parents the way they were parented, and in this case, everyone the fathers father the way they were fathered, unless they are refathered by somebody or someone else. So intentionality will be needed for that. Everything that a positive fatherhood experience touches changes for the better. So it's worth the battle, it's worth the investment, it's worth the struggle. I encourage the men to talk to each other. I encourage the women to become the wind beneath the wings of their fathers, of their children, because by lifting up and supporting the men to become better fathers, as they lift up the entire family with them. And in a world, again, that is keen on splitting people by arbitrary beats and making females fight against males, it's a zero-sum game, and the people who end up getting hurt are we ourselves. So I think fatherhood is a brilliant thing. It's been the source of great movies. It's been the source of great inspiration, and I think we can and should redeem the same. So thank you for Arodi in absentia. Thank you for Tony. Thank you, Mudachi, and thank you, Syria, for each one of you making time. Thank you for sharing your experiences and from your own examples. That is deeply appreciated. And thank you because of maintaining candor with calmness. It's really many father experiences or meetings we go like this usually end up having a very coarse, abrasive, attacking tone even at times. But this has had the mix of calling out and support, and that is something I deeply appreciate. Please, as always, we say for all our panelists, if you want to support their side gigs and the things they do, you can always be in touch so that, hey, we'll let you know. Tony does coaching, and so does Syria. Arodi works in HR. We've got an old Mudachi does. And if you want to get their services, please do get in touch, and please pay them when you get in touch with them. So thanks, and we are meeting in a fortnight, as is our custom. Oh, I needed to remind me before I lean into my computer like I'm hugging it, the data next topic. But as we do remember about that, we encourage you to follow us, to like, to share, subscribe. First, we want to celebrate all those who've done a good work of following us on Facebook. The numbers are looking good. Now we pray that you will send and share the same love to our YouTube pages, which is Authentic Dialogues and Sire Jackson. Those are two YouTube pages. Share your love there and like and subscribe. do the same on our Instagram page, which is One Sir Jackson. We would really appreciate. And as always, we do value your suggestions, both for topics and for moderators. We do invite your questions and we want to engage with them meaningfully. So please do share the same. So until the next time, this is me leaning in. Until next time, next Sunday.
Yeah, next Sunday, because the other Sunday is Easter. So we had to pull the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So because we want to give people an Easter break, we meet next Sunday. You will get the link and the topics through the same channel. So please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Motherhood is a fact, they joke. Fatherhood is an opinion. But if we become good fathers, we can be able to do it well. As my Swahili friends told me, in Swahili they say baba ni mzazi, baba ni mlezi, sio mzazi, loosely translated in English to be your father is the one who raises you up, who nurtures you, not just the one who biologically sired you. So I think we can make the difference to move to becoming walezi, the nurturers, and not just wazazi, the people who bring forth children. May fatherhood do well, and thank you once again. Peace. Back to you, Paul.
We always forget to thank the people who are able to join us. Thank you, our audience, both on Facebook, the ones who are currently on Zoom and the ones who will endure, my goodness, 2.5 hours. I pity those ones. 2.5 hours after this. Thank you very much. Tukutane, makutano. There's no behind the scenes. I have to do my motherhood bit. Kwaherini. Asanteni na kwaheri.